My wife said to me, "Send your mother away, donde, or send me." What would you choose? Your wife, whom you promised to love, or your mother, who gave you life? In this story, you will feel the pain of a man standing between two worlds. You will also learn simple English sentences and words while following each event. Stay with me until the end, because the answer will surprise you and the lesson will touch your heart. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video if you love emotional stories and subscribe to Glorious English to learn English through real and powerful life lessons. When I married Ella, I thought life would be simple. My mother Rosa was an old woman with soft hands and kind eyes. She lived with me all her life after my father died. She cooked for me, washed my clothes, and prayed for me every morning. When Ella came into the house, I believed the two women I loved could live in peace. At first, Ella smiled politely and even helped my mother in the kitchen. But after a few days, things started to change. Small matters grew into loud fights. One night, my mother asked Ella to close the door because of the cold, and Ella shouted, "Stop ordering me!" I stood between them, confused and worried, wondering what went wrong. One morning, I returned from work early and heard voices from the kitchen. My mother was telling Ella gently, "Please don't waste food. Keep the leftovers." Ella replied sharply, "Stop controlling me. I'm not your servant." I walked in and the room fell silent. My mother's eyes filled with tears while Ella looked away without a word. That night, when I asked Ella why she spoke like that, she said, "Your mother hates me. She wants to control everything I do." I tried to explain that my mother was just old and careful, but Ella folded her arms and said coldly, "You never take my side. You only defend her." Her words cut me deeply and stayed in my heart all night. Another evening, I came home late. My mother had waited with hot food on the table, her hands busy setting plates. Ella sat on the sofa, scrolling on her phone without looking up. I asked, "Ella, can you bring me some water?" She sighed loudly and said, "Why don't you ask your precious mother?" My mother quickly stood and fetched the water. Her hands trembled as she placed the glass on the table. I noticed how her back was bent with age, yet she never complained. Later that night, Ella whispered, "I can't live with her. She makes me feel like an outsider in this house." I stayed quiet, but my heart grew heavy like a stone pressing inside. Sunday morning, my mother asked Ella softly, "Will you come to the market with me? I can't carry heavy bags alone." Ella refused without looking at her. "I'm tired," she said, turning her face away. So my mother went alone. Hours passed and she still didn't return. I became worried and hurried to look for her. At the market, I found her struggling with two heavy baskets. Her face was red from the hot sun and sweat dripped down her forehead. I quickly took the bags from her hands and helped her home. When we reached, Ella was sleeping peacefully in bed. My mother smiled weakly and said, "It's fine, son." But deep inside, I felt shame burning like fire. If you are still watching, it means this story has touched your heart. Please share this video with friends so they can also learn English and feel the emotion in this story. As days passed, Ella began avoiding my mother more and more. She cooked her own meals and ignored the food my mother carefully prepared. One evening, she locked herself in the bedroom while my mother and I ate dinner alone. I asked her later why she did that. She shouted, "Because I don't want to sit with her." She stares at me as if I'm a stranger in this house. I told her my mother was just quiet because of age, but Ella shook her head stubbornly. "You must choose," she whispered coldly, looking straight into my eyes. "Either me or her. I won't stay here otherwise." My stomach twisted painfully when I heard those words. The final blow came one evening after work. I returned home to find my mother sitting outside the house, her small bundle of clothes beside her feet. "What happened, Mama?" I asked in shock. She looked down and whispered softly, "Ella told me this is not my home anymore. She said I should leave before I cause more trouble." My heart pounded in my chest like a drum. I ran inside and asked Ella, "Did you really say that?" She looked at me calmly and replied, "Yes, decide now. If she stays, I go." Her voice was firm, her face cold and hard. I stood frozen between my wife and my mother, torn into two painful halves. That night, silence filled the house like a heavy cloud. My mother sat alone in her room, pretending to knit, but her hands shook too much to hold the needles. I went to check on her and saw tears sliding down her face. She whispered softly, "I will go tomorrow if this is what she wants." My heart twisted painfully. At the same time, I heard Ella banging the kitchen drawers, making noise as if to prove she was the real owner of the house. I walked in and asked her calmly, "Why can't we find a way to live together?" But she refused to answer, only muttered again, "You must choose." That night, I lay awake between two worlds: the woman who gave me life and the woman I had promised to protect forever. The next morning, I suggested we all have breakfast together. I thought maybe food could soften their hearts. I prepared pancakes, the way Ella loved, and tea, the way my mother preferred. They both sat at the table, but the air was heavy and tense. My mother tried kindly to ask Ella about her work, but Ella replied with short, sharp words. Then, suddenly, the doorbell rang. It was Ella's cousin, who came with a bundle of wedding photos. She praised Ella's beauty and ignored my mother completely, which made my mother excuse herself and quietly return to her room. That small moment showed me clearly how invisible she was becoming in her own home. Later that day, I took my mother for a slow walk in the park. She told me stories of her struggles after my father's death. She had worked 2 jobs to raise me, yet she smiled through the pain of those years. She said, "I do not need a big house or riches. I just want to hear your voice every morning." When we returned, Ella was waiting at the door with crossed arms. She said coldly, "Are you building a life with me or living in the past with her?" My mother looked down, embarrassed, while I stood frozen in shock. Just then, a neighbor passing by greeted us warmly, calling my mother kind and strong. I saw Ella's face tighten with silent anger. That evening, Ella packed her suitcase halfway and placed it near the living room so I could see it clearly. She wanted to send me a message. She said softly but firmly, "I will not stay another week if she is here." My mother heard it from the hallway. She entered slowly, carrying an old photo album in her hands. She placed it on the table and said, "I will leave tomorrow, son. Don't worry. A wife is more important than a mother." She smiled gently, but her eyes betrayed deep pain. I felt like a knife had cut through my chest. I held the album and saw pictures of my first day at school, my birthdays, and her endless sacrifices. That night I made a decision. I went to Ella and said, "If my mother leaves, I leave too. I cannot be a son who forgets where he came from." She gasped in shock that I would choose my mother over her, but I explained firmly, "Marriage is love, but love without respect is nothing. If you cannot respect her, how can you respect me?" Ella turned her face away and cried silently. At that moment, my mother came out holding her small suitcase, ready to go. I quickly stopped her at the door and hugged her tightly, telling her she would never leave this house alone. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Ella entered the kitchen where my mother was making tea and quietly said, "Teach me how you cook it like that. It was the first soft sentence between them. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled and showed her patiently. Later, Ella told me she had thought all night and realized if she forced me to choose, she would lose both me and her own heart. Slowly, small gestures turned into peace. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. From then on, I learned one truth. Family is not about choosing one or the other, but about finding a way to hold everyone together in love. Thank you for watching until the end. What would you do if you were in his place? Choose your wife or your mother. Write your answer in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Glorious English for more simple, emotional stories that help you learn English every day.